Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So we are halfway through the year. Who would have thought? I know we're already in July and I was planning this in June, but some other things came up. Now we're just going to take the time to see where I am with my reading goals, books that I recommend, and the best books I've read this year so far. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. My goals for this year were to read 70 books. Last year my goal was 65 and I reached that goal. So happy. But this year we are right on track. According to Goodreads, I've read 36 books. I don't know if you can see that, but 36 books out of 70. So I'm right on track for this year. I did have a little bit of a slump during June, but I think we've made up for it. Today, I just want to tell you about my favorite books that I've read thus far. If you've watched any of my videos, you'll know that I started my reading year basically in December, so like the end of December after my yearly roundup. I do not have all the books with me, so I'll just pop the pictures on the screens just so you know. But we're going to start with my 4-star books. So we're not going to talk about anything lower than a 4-star today, according to my ratings and what I enjoyed. So I do have some notes around me just to like jog my memory. But sometimes I read a book and I will just completely forget about it and forget the character names, the plot and whatever. So I'll just tell you as much as I remember and why I like these books. We're going to start with a thriller that I read at the beginning of the year and it's called 5 Survive. It is by Holly Jackson, who wrote the Good Girl's Guide to Murder as well. Has anybody watched that show? I really am dying to watch it, but I haven't gotten there yet. So 5 Survive was a really fast-paced thriller. It was all set in one night. I think it spanned over 8 hours, and every chapter break you'd see the countdown of the time. It had unlikable characters, it had a lot of suspense, it had an unreliable narrator, and I was just so enthralled. I think I read it in 2 sittings in one day and was honestly one of the better thrillers I've read in a really long time. It was also one of my favorite Holly Jackson books. 5 Survive, it hit all the marks that I wanted in a thriller book. There was snipers, there was high stakes, and honestly, I would 100% recommend if you have the same tastes as me, don't like really slow, drag out, too character-based thrillers. Then moving on to this one I have, Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the second book in the Natural series. I also read The Naturals, but that will come later. This book was very entertaining. About the first 50 to 100 pages I didn't really enjoy because it was basically a recap on what had happened in the previous book, and I just felt like it carried on too long. It could have just been one chapter, going back, saying what happened, and moving on with the story. And for that, I only rated it a 4-star, but it was really exciting. Dean's story was very, very interesting. If you haven't read this, it's all kids that are recruited by the FBI for some extraordinary abilities that they have. Nothing magical or anything like that, but they have like higher instincts than the average person. So one is a statistical genius, the other one can read like body language. Like that show was called the one where he reads body language. I can't remember what it's called right now. Lie to Me. That's what it's called, Lie to Me. So they can read like cues and social behavior. So they're all recruited into like this little section of the FBI, or is it CIA? Something like that. All of them have this natural ability to tell certain things. Like one's a human lie detector as well. Each of them have some sort of trauma that they experience in their childhood in order to heighten that ability, and each of them follows a different character. So the first one, The Naturals, which we'll speak about later, is about Cassie, and then this one is about Dean. His father is in jail because of something he did, and a lot of people doubt him and think that he is kind of like his father, but he doesn't show those traits. It follows his story and it's a little bit more of an emotional one, and I really enjoyed hearing his story. He's such a kind-hearted, smart guy, and I feel like he gets overlooked a lot because he's more quiet and reserved than the rest of the people in the house. All of them literally have something. I just really enjoyed Dean's side of things. I don't know if I will enjoy the rest of the series, but I heard it does get better, especially the last book. But yeah, very, very good, very fast-paced, very easy to understand, and very easy to follow. Her writing is literally amazing, and the chapters are so short as well. They're like, I think the longest chapter is about 5 pages, which makes you feel like you're reading so much faster. The font is the perfect size. It is young adult, but it's oh my gosh, the mystery element of it. If you like true crime as well, you would absolutely love this book because they work on a lot of cold cases as well. And eventually they end up, you know, working on active cases, which is really, really interesting to read about, and I would highly recommend. The next book we have is part of a series, and I kind of rated all the books the same in the series, and I would say it was a 4-star series, but all the books, I don't think I rated anything above a 3 or below a 3, shall I say. So I don't have the first book, but this book, oh my gosh, I love this series. So it's called the Selection series. It's dystopian. If you love anything like that, that's kind of in our world, but kind of a little bit fucked up, I think you'd enjoy this. I think it would be great for teenagers as well because there's no spice or anything in it, but it's kind of like a romantic dystopian story. Think Hunger Games, think Divergent, those type of things, but without the brain element. So the Selection is about a competition that this town has, or this world that they live in. I called Ilya. Isn't that what it's called in Powerless as well? But yeah, it's called Ilya. So they live in a land where there are different castes or like sections or sectors of society. So they have castes through 1 through 8, and 1 being royalty, 8 being the lowest caste, which is like jobs that nobody wants and considered to be very lower class. So in order to make the community feel like they're involved in things, they kind of run this competition called the Selection, I think, when the prince comes of age, to find him a wife. All the castes can apply, but you know, he chooses one ultimately, and they just go through kind of like The Bachelor, where they go through eliminations. America enters into this competition, but she doesn't really want to be there because she's going through a heavy breakup, and she kind of wants to be Maxton's friends, and she's really there for her parents or her family to receive money, which she kind of discloses with him, and they form this really cute friendship, and through that they kind of fall for each other. There's a lot of drama and juiciness and pettiness and really bitchy girls in it, which I absolutely ate up, and I would highly recommend if you're the same as me. I did also read the little novella. There is 2 of them. It's called The Selection Stories, and it's the point of view of the prince and then also her ex-boyfriend, who is the guard, but all of this is written in their point of view. Next, I read Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. She writes a lot of dark romance, and not a lot of people appreciate her writing, but I do. I think it's so funny, so juicy, so taboo, but it's still so interesting and entertaining and enticing. Follows our main character. Her name is Jordan, and she lives with her boyfriend, but neither of them have like high-paying jobs, and he's kind of a flake. They are only like 18 years old, but he's kind of like a flake, and sometimes he won't pay the rent and all of this. So eventually they get evicted, and they have nowhere to go because she comes from a really low-income family who live in a trailer, and she doesn't want to move back home. So on a whim, he goes to his father, and his father offers them to live in his house rent-free until, you know, they make enough money. But Jordan has her head screwed on. She is in college, and she's always doing her schoolwork. She's going to work every day. She participates in household chores, but her boyfriend does not. So he's kind of a spoiled brat. He drinks a lot, he parties a lot. One night, drunk and stupid, he comes home, has a little gathering with his friends, and she catches him cheating on her. So they end up breaking up. He decides that she can stay with his dad in their house because, you know, she doesn't have anywhere else to live. So he's gonna move in with this girl that he's been hooking up with. His dad, Pike, is really level-headed. He seems really reserved, and he has a weird attraction to Jordan. So the premise of the book is boyfriend's father. You can surmise what happens there. I thought it was so interesting. It is a little bit taboo. Like, the age gap is probably 20 years, and some people found it a little bit gross, but I found it entertaining. I thought it was really funny. So the last 3 books we have are all thrillers, and this is obviously still the 4-star section. The first book I have is Want to Know a Secret by yours truly, Freida McFadden. I really like this book. I found it so juicy and interesting as well. Our main character, April, she is a YouTuber. She has a YouTube channel like called Sweet Treat with April or something to that effect, and she bakes and, you know, shows her family, and she's got this thing going, and she just thinks that she's like a local celebrity. Everybody in the neighborhood is quite standoffish with her, and she thinks she has all these friends, but meanwhile everybody is like kind of weary of her. Her son is a little nuisance. He causes so much havoc. He is a compulsive liar. And when their new neighbors move in, the little boy leaves their yard and goes to play with the neighbor's kid. And she's freaking out because someone sent her a message and was like, your kid's not where it's supposed to be. So she freaks out, gets her husband involved. They're so close to calling the police, and she goes next door and her son is there playing with the kid next door. And when she asks him why he did this, he said, oh, you know, the neighbor came over and said, oh, your mom said it's fine if I go play there. But that wasn't true. It goes back and forth, and like April's really jealous of like her husband's mistress. It's his secretary, but ends up being his mistress, and she ends up pregnant, but then they find her dead. When the point of view switches, it's her best friend, Julie, who she thinks is her best friend, but actually is really scared of her. She knows more about April than April lets on. It's very juicy. It's like a domestic type of thriller, and it's like kind of Desperate Housewife-esque. Really good. Would suggest. Highly recommend. The next book we have is another Frida McFadden, which is The Ex. So if you saw my last reading vlog, which was a couple of weeks ago, I read a couple of thrillers, and this follows a very interesting plot line, and it is about a girl named Cassie who inherited a bookshop from her parents, and she hasn't had the best life, or her grandparents, sorry. She hasn't had the best life. She's had quite a tough time. She meets this guy named Joel who has a history with his exes. Cassie starts getting stalked. The weirdest things are happening to her. Someone's breaking into her apartment. Someone stole her EpiPen because she's allergic to peanuts, so she has a reaction. And Joel, luckily, is a doctor, and he jumps in and actually saves her. The juiciness of the exes and her trying to figure out what's going on, because every time someone mentions this ex, Francesca, he kind of like tenses up, goes pale, can't respond, like just a weird visceral reaction. So she's trying to figure out what's going on with him. When you find out who's doing it to her, it's actually like crazy. It's got so many twists and turns. I really loved it and highly recommend again. Then the last one in our 4-star category is one called The Orphanage by the Lake by Daniel G. Miller. And this follows our main character, whose name is Hazel. She is a private investigator. She is Korean. She's been shunned and always made to feel like her career wasn't important because her family are Korean and they only want doctors, lawyers, and all of that in the family. She kind of is shunned away. She lives in a shitty apartment with one of her childhood friends. She gets this huge case, and the lady's like willing to pay her $100,000 to solve this case, but she only has 10 days. So Madison is like from a super wealthy family, and the person she is looking for is her goddaughter. Her goddaughter was put into an orphanage because at the time she couldn't look after her. She'd go visit her like once or twice a year. It was just a little bit of a weird story. The principal of the school is very like tight-lipped, very closed off, very closed book. When Hazel goes to investigate, no matter who she's speaking to, everybody's turning her away or sending her in an opposite direction. She ends up like contacting the cops, and they are also like kind of standoffish. The twists and turns, I tell you, were juicy. I got through this book so fast because it was just one of those that enticed you and you kept wanting to know what was happening. So it was like one more chapter, one more chapter. Like I said in the book review that I did of this, it was kind of like the same storyline or backstory that Haunting Adeline had. The human trafficking and all of that is in it. And when you find out who was responsible for all the disappearances, mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. That's all the 4 stars. If the angles changed, I'm so sorry. I just had to get up and do something. Next, for 4.5 star reads. These are very highly rated by me. I really, really thoroughly enjoy them and think about them all the time. The first one is Unravel Me by Tahara Murphy. Loved this book. So it is dystopian. It is also young adult. It is in basically America, but like they've broken down borders and there's war everywhere. Places were disassembled by the re-establishment, which is these people who are in government political power. It's ugly. It gets so ugly. There's a group of people who have powers. The re-establishment is absolutely petrified, so they're kind of taking those people out, but they form an underground compound where everybody with powers is recruited into to fight against the re-establishment. And our main character, Juliet, was institutionalized because of her power. Her parents just shoved her in there and never thought of her again. She was in there, I think, for like almost 10 years. She is now rescued. I don't want to tell you too much about it because it will give it away, but the first book is in this video somewhere. I love this book. It just there was a bit in it, actually highlighted, not highlighted, tabbed a couple of it. There's a little bit in this book that was a little bit boring and repetitive, so that's why I didn't give it a 5-star, but absolutely loved it, would recommend, cannot wait to continue on with this series. Okay, the next 2 books are again part of a series, and this is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I've never rated any of her books 5-star. I just feel like it's a little bit too juvenile for me, but I still love the storylines. It's so fast-paced, so easy to read, so quick to understand. This follows our main character Avery, who inherited money from a man she didn't know, and his family is not happy about it. He's left them a bunch of clues and riddles and games to play to figure out what is going on. It's juicy. He has like, I think it's 4 grandsons, and Avery kind of has an affinity for all of them for different reasons. She's this kind of a love triangle between her and 2 of the sons. Her friends get involved, her family's involved, like everybody is trying to get this money away from her. She doesn't even want it, but she just wants to understand why he left her this money. And you just go through the motions with them, the games they play, the riddles they have. It's very fun and very, very entertaining, and literally you can read one of these in a day. Absolutely love it. I have not read the last book yet. I am saving it for a reading series video, so would recommend. 4.5 stars for the series as a whole. I did rate the first book a 4.5. Unfortunately, the second one was a 4-star, but I just wanted to put them together because together I think it's a 4.5 rating in my opinion. Would recommend, loved this, and it added to the joy of reading this year. That sounds really cheesy, but it's the truth. Next, The Ballad of Never After. Once Upon a Broken Heart, I gave a 5-star. It was whimsical, it was magical, it was all the things, and I absolutely couldn't put it down. It was great. Then I read The Ballad of Never After, which 4.5 isn't a bad one, but I was a little disappointed because I felt like it went round and round in circles, and Evangeline hadn't learned anything from her past experiences. I don't know how to describe it, but it was frustrating. She was frustrating. I did this in like a failed 24-hour readathon, so I don't think I gave this the mental capacity it needed at the time, but this is a fantasy. Our main character, Evangeline, if you've read the first book or watched my video reading the first book, Evangeline kind of goes to this fate, which is like a mystical being, and she asks him to help her break up her ex-boyfriend's marriage. So he does that, but she owes him 3 kisses. But he has other plans for her. He's very, very, very manipulative and conniving, and he tricks her into doing all these things. In this story, like I said, in the second book, she's still quite stupid and just makes the same mistakes over and over, and she gets herself into situations where you're like, why? But still, the writing is so magical. I love the description and the depiction of the world and the magic, and I fell in love with this book and highly, highly recommend. My camera battery died, so forgive me if the landscaping has changed again. Next, I read a bunch of books on my Kindle, and then one book I gave to a friend to read, but she's never given it back, so I'm gonna have to pop a picture up. The next one we read was The Worst Best Man by Lucy Score. I've seen such bad reviews on this book, and I don't know why. I found it highly entertaining. So it is about a couple getting married, and his best man and her maid of honor just do not get on. It is like love, hate, love, hate, love, hate, enemies to lovers, but they actually hate each other for no reason. They end up having to deal with a situation got to do with the bride and groom that they are forced to work together, and they end up together at the end. And I found it so, so interesting. She is like pushing back. She doesn't want a relationship, but he treats her really, really well, and she doesn't understand. Like, he's super wealthy, super popular. She doesn't get why he wants to be with her because she's none of those things. The back and forth between them, the banter is absolutely entertaining. It is spicy as well, quite a bit of smut. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Recommend. I would 100% recommend. Then we have Magnolia Parks. As you can see, I started tabbing it pretty late in the game. Absolutely loved it. She has this stupid affinity for like naming people's clothes that they wear. Like, that's Ralph Lauren, that is Gucci, she's wearing this, and I didn't care about that, and I felt like it brought nothing to the book, especially that she did it in every single chapter. It is about Magnolia Parks and BJ Valentine, who have the most toxic, fucked up relationship, and their friend group is included in the story. It's very, very dramatic. It's very juicy. Think Gossip Girl, but not American. And I know a lot of people said the Gossip Girl reference wasn't correct. I say it is like the juiciest drama. They fuck each other over constantly, and I loved it. It was so entertaining. So entertaining, absolutely. Couldn't recommend this more. The second book, however, not great. Went on and on and on and on and on forever. Magnolia is so toxic, and so is BJ. And like I said, they just fuck each other over all the time. When the big secret is revealed at the end, didn't love that, but it added to the juiciness and the drama, and I cannot wait to read Magnolia's next book. Then we have The Naturals, which is the first book in the series. Like I said, Killer Instinct was the second, Naturals was the first, and that one follows Cassie's story. Again, they were recruited by the FBI in a certain sector, and they're not allowed to work on active cases, but something happens and she ends up being involved in an active case. It goes through her life as well, which was really good, but like I said, it's a page turner. It grasps you. There's so much happening, and you can somehow relate to the kids. Like, I just found it so interesting and so intriguing and so easy and fast to read. The last book in our 4.5 sector is Heartbreaker by Elle Kennedy. I never heard of this book, but I just saw it was available on Kindle Unlimited, and I was like, yes, nice introduction to Elle Kennedy's writing. This one is sort of like a darker romance, and it's a very smutty, very smutty. Our main character, her name is Jen, and she's a really pretty girl, and she gets hit on a lot. She gets taken not so seriously by her boyfriends and partners, but when she ends up breaking up with her ex-boyfriend, he becomes super obsessed with her, sending her emails. He attacked her, done all these things. Our main male character, and his name is Cash, he's part of the army, but they meet one night by chance in the storeroom of a bar. Like, he just needs to get away from this girl who keeps following him because she's like a army slut, like anybody military should like just pounce on. We have Jen, who's there because she's having a shitty time. Her friends are being mean to her, and you know, her job's not going well, and she was crying in the room, and he walks in and they kind of start a conversation, end up hooking up, get disrupted by the manager and end up leaving. He gets her number, but then by chance drops his phone into a puddle of water outside, loses her number. Let's go by, and again Jen is attacked by this guy, and he just won't give up. So her brother is the general of this military base, and he is actually Cash's superior. He ends up moving her in with Cash, not realizing that they had met, and a lot of stuff unfolds. Very juicy stuff, very entertaining. There is a twist, there's a third act breakup, but so good, and I loved Elle Kennedy's writing in it. I read this while I was away with my family on a family holiday and my partner, and I was literally sitting at the fire like while we're barbecuing reading this smut, and I had just had to keep a straight face, but it was literally had me kicking, screaming, giggling, like all the things. Absolutely loved it. Everything might have changed again because I had to stop. My mom came home from work. So anyway, lastly, 5 stars. So I only have 2. I've only found 2 5-stars this year. Crazy, but I think I'm just being more specific about what I rate 5-star. The first one, Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi, which is the first book in the Shatter Me series. Unravel Me was the second. This book was a joy to read. The writing is almost lyrical and poetic, and I just love the way she writes. There's bits in the book as well where Juliet is kind of writing in a journal style entry, and she'll like cross it out or she'll repeat things, but it's so easy to read, easy to understand. The world building isn't the absolute best. The political side of things isn't the absolutely best described either. Do you understand the gist of it? And the whole story just made sense in my head, and it was so nostalgic for me. I absolutely loved it and would recommend over and over and over again. Then lastly, I don't know if any of you knew or guessed, ACOTAR. So it was my first Sarah J. Maas book, A Court of Thorn and Roses. It's fantasy. It's gorgeous, and I absolutely loved it. I wasn't sure how I felt about fantasy. I feel like I like straight fantasy better than like romantasy. There isn't a huge romance plot in this, but it is a element in the book. But I really loved like the roughness and rawness of this book. It kept me going. The writing is tiny, and this book is like 400 and something pages, 419. But it felt so quick. I'm already moved on to the second book. It is feeling like a 4-star too. That one's 600 pages, but it feels like I'm breezing through. The plot is kind of difficult to explain, but it's kind of like in a realm where there's fairies and mortals and there's a wall between them. They're not supposed to cross the wall. Humans are scared of fairies and fairies are rumored to eat them. And there are different types of fae and different species of them. There are bad ones and then there are good ones, and then you get high fae and lesser fairies. The high lords, they rule each different sector of, it's called Perinthian. I think that's how you pronounce it. Farah she comes from a really less fortunate family, and she's the only person in her family who can provide because her dad went through something crazy where he's no longer able to walk, so he's kind of disabled. Her sisters are like high princesses and don't do anything, so Farah's the only one who can hunt. So she goes out and hunts for her family. One day she's out trying to catch a deer, but there's a wolf. She wasn't sure, but she just killed the wolf, and she had her opportunity to, and it ended up being a fairy. However, she took its hide off, the pelt they call it, and she went and sold it. The fairy who he belonged to, the high lord of that realm, actually came over and he threatened to kill her, or she could come with him and live out her days there. But she's not really a prisoner. He kind of lets her do what she wants to. He grants her access to painting, and they build up a relationship. His advisor is called Lucian. I really like his character. A lot of people didn't. I loved it. Yeah, the whole story just unfolds so nicely, and the way the area and the world is described is gorgeous. I really love Sarah J. Maas's writing. I didn't want to read Throne of Glass, so there was nothing pulling me towards that, but now knowing her writing, I think I might try, although those books are thick, but I might try that. But I cannot recommend this enough. People have told me so many times to pick it up, and I kept putting it off because it is quite an intimidating series, but it's so easy to read, so easy to understand, and it is so captivating. So that is all the books that I have today. I don't have everything in my hand, but that is a lot of books, and I'm so happy with my reading experience this year. I am literally having the best time. I was in a little bit of slump after reading a couple of worse books. Let me know if you want to see the worst books I read. I might just do a video anyway, but very excited, and I'm very happy to share these with you. Please do let me know if you've read any of them, what you thought, and which ones you would like to read next. I would love to know and start a conversation. But with all that being said, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much if you liked and commented on this video. I really appreciate it. It helps me get into the swing of the algorithm. And yeah, that's all for me. I will see you next week. Hopefully there will be a reading vlog. I've been struggling with getting this next reading vlog out, hence why I decided to put this video up now. But I'll see you all in my next one. Bye guys.